Scotland to make use of the Great Seal of Scotland until another Great Seal of Scotland be prepared and authorised.
Approved.
Draft of an order in Council authorising Your Majesty's First Minister of Wales to make use of the existing Welsh Seal until another Welsh Seal be prepared and authorised.
Approved.
Draft of an order in Council authorising the public seals authorising the respective public seals lately in use elsewhere than in the United Kingdom to be made use of until new seals be prepared and their use duly authorised.
Approved.
Draft of an order in Council confirming Your Majesty's wishes in relation to the Sovereign Grant Act 2011 to continue the tradition of surrendering the hereditary revenues, including the Crown Estate, to your government for the benefit of all, in return for the sovereign grant, which supports your official duties as head of state and head of nation.
Approved.
Drafts of 2 proclamations. 1. Appointing the day of Her late Majesty's state funeral as a bank holiday in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. 2. Appointing the day of Her late Majesty's state funeral as a bank holiday in Scotland. And of 2 orders in Council directing the Lord Chancellor to affix the Great Seal to the proclamations.
Approved.
I now invite Your Majesty to sign both proclamations. And that, Your Majesty, concludes today's business for the Council.
And as he moves back into the chamber, Charles III has been
May I now invite the deputation party and the witnesses to the oath to exit via the picture gallery and the matted hall.
Also, as Charles III has been proclaimed as head of state and the nation. Earlier he made a speech, paid tributes to his late mother.
I now ask Privy Councillors present to exit via the picture gallery and the matted hall and invite you to sign the proclamation, which is laid out in the lower corridor. Thank you all for attending today.
All right, after that conclusion, Charles III, the head of state, nation proclaimed as king. Earlier he made a speech, paid tribute to his late mother, Elizabeth, with consolatory messages still coming from around the world. He emphasized that he was deeply aware of great responsibilities that will be expected of him. And of course, talking about the aspiring of sovereignty, peace, and of course, Commonwealth rules, and so many others as well. He said it is a heavy task. And of course, he also gave his approval to various drafts being mentioned earlier. Of course, he had to take an oath of security of the Church of Scotland, which is a vital part of this process of his proclamation, and he had to do that with a Bible in hand. And of course, the official signing of the oath itself with which was witnessed, signed by, of course, yes, one of them, Nicola Sturgeon, First Minister of Scotland, earlier, and more signing as well. And of course, his son, Prince William, and of course, the Queen Consort, Camilla, also signing as well.
All right.
And there were also heads of other regions given their assent through signing. And we can see those who are attendees being led out of the chamber. Quite a brief ceremony, and Kwateng,
Yes.
one of the new appointees under the Liz Truss cabinet, also signing there as well. Of course,
Yeah, and of course, as we see many dignitaries filing out, it's very noteworthy to say that this is quite a number of firsts in here. This, very interestingly, is the first time that women have been permitted to attend the meeting of the Ascension Council, as well as the first time it's been televised. So yet another first in British history. But talking about some of the signs there, we also have the UK Prime Minister Liz Truss, amongst others,
Yes.
who signed the proclamation of King Charles III just moments ago. You know, very interesting times for Liz, because just days after arriving into office, she is taking on arguably the greatest challenge of any UK Prime Minister in living memory.
indeed, we're seeing, perhaps, just as you mentioned, a liberalization of some rules there. If you could allow women now to be a part of this process, I think it depends on the current narratives and those who are actually at the helm of affairs, and how far you could go to making this more engaging with different strata of society. Still talking about society, we can still see a crowd of mourners there in front of the Buckingham Palace, and still more people signing what appears to be the condolence register, I believe. And it's been a memorable event.
Yes.
And of course, I was actually expecting a more elaborate
Yeah, but in true British
ceremony.
fashion, it
Yes,
is quick,
it's quick,
prompt,
prompt,
very
and,
important.
and simple.
Yeah,
Simple and
the simplicity of it,
Yeah.
which in many ways pretty much encapsulates what the Queen Elizabeth II was all about.
Indeed. And all right, we've been watching this special edition of Arise News coverage to St. James proclamation of King Charles III. It's good to have you with us. And of course, we will be monitoring every aspect of this process as the days go by, which is still ongoing. Arise News will be on top of it. I'm Neo Iloran, of course.
I'm Abby Owolawi.
Thank you for joining us.
politicians who, as you say, Rhiannon, have gathered out here to mingle with the crowds, to take in, and it's an overused phrase, but this really is this moment in history.
Yes, some decided to leave earlier, but I think a number of them have decided to want to stop and pause. And I think, like so many across the country, maybe spend a bit of time reflecting on their own memories of meeting the Queen. One thing that certainly will unite many of them. But what was also fascinating today was the Privy Council members that we see waiting out here now is this body that we're often reminded of how important it is to the monarch, the sovereign. They're this body of advisors. But never have we seen that gathering filmed before. We've never been able to witness it. And yet we now saw the new king actually conducting the business of state. Penny Mordaunt saying certain things, and then the new king saying approved. And that gives us a new insight into monarchy, brings it into the 21st century, and at a time when people will, I think, feel, some people bemused by the fact that this has all happened so quickly. The death of a much-loved monarch, and already we have fanfare about a new sovereign. Opening the doors, letting people in, hopefully will explain the process a bit better.
And Rhiannon, just on practical matters, we got some new information, didn't we, during the course of that process, about the funeral, that it will be a bank holiday.
Yes, so we now know that the King has approved an order declaring that we will all have a bank holiday on the day of the funeral. When is that day? We don't know at the moment. But
do we know when we will be told, when that will be decided?
So we're anticipating that we're going to have the first briefing in terms of what we can expect over the coming days, and potentially the date of that funeral later this afternoon. So hopefully by this evening we will know when that bank holiday is going to be, and a few more details about what is to come over the next days or so.
Well, let's rejoin Alistair Bruce, our royal commentator. And Alistair, we're 4 or 5 minutes away from this moment in history for the first time since 1952, when we are going to hear the reading of the proclamation of a new monarch.
As you speak, the state trumpeters coming out onto the balcony here above Friary Court. And the intention of this event is to speak to a nation, a commonwealth in mourning, and to raise the heads of that nation to celebrate that there is a new monarch. From the window onto this balcony will come the pursuivants, heralds, and kings of arms of the College of Arms. Also the sergeants at arms, the heralds wearing the tabards which show the coat of arms of the king. Kings of arms wearing white plumes on their cocked hats, and also with them will come the Earl Marshal, the Duke of Norfolk. They will spread across the balcony. And here comes the Garter King of Arms, David White, who with the Earl Marshal beside him holds the proclamation.
Have we had the trumpets?
waiting for the moment of 11 o'clock when the guns will start to fire to mark the announcement that the King has given instruction to be read out, that the Queen has died and approved by the Privy Council. He has now been identified and confirmed as the rightful new King. From the principal palace of the monarchy here at St. James's, the principal proclamation will be made at the moment 11 o'clock strikes, and they'll be watched by the new King, by the Queen Consort, the Prince of Wales, and waiting down below, the King's Guard, number 7 Company, 2nd Battalion Coldstream Guards, who will later present arms to celebrate the new King, and then we'll give 3 cheers to His Majesty. The principal proclamation of King Charles III.
Whereas it has pleased Almighty God to call to His mercy our late Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth II, of blessed and glorious memory, by whose decease the crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is solely and rightfully come to the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George. We, therefore, the Lords Spiritual and Temporal of this realm, and members of the House of Commons, together with other members of Her late Majesty's Privy Council, and representatives of the realms and territories, aldermen and citizens of London and others, do now hereby, with one voice and consent of tongue and heart, publish and proclaim that the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George is now, by the death of our late sovereign of happy memory, become our only lawful and rightful liege lord, Charles III. By the grace of God, of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of his other realms and territories, King, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith, to whom we do acknowledge all faith and obedience with humble affection, beseeching God, by whom kings and queens do reign, to bless His Majesty with long and happy years to reign over us. Given at St. James's Palace this 10th day of September in the year of our Lord 2022.
The captain of the King's Guard will now order the troops to present arms, and the colour will be lowered. And then God Save the King.
God save the King!
To a great cheer, the captain of the guard brings the troops out of the present, and they will now ground their arms, place their rifles on the ground and prepare to give 3 cheers. They kneel down, place their rifles and return. So with joy, wherever you are, if you wish, join in with 3 cheers for the new king.
3 cheers for His Majesty the King. Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray!
Captain of the King's Guard will now start placing of headdress, the recovery of the arms, and Garter King of Arms, the Kings of Arms, the Heralds Pursuivants of the College of Arms will then, along with the Heralds Extraordinary, leave from the balcony. And the principal proclamation of the new reign is done. We wait to find out the date of the state funeral of the late Queen, which will be announced later, but the nation in mourning has raised its head and will, in the proclamations that take place across the United Kingdom, I see in Edinburgh, the guns are firing in salute to the proclamation having been made, and having completed that gun salute, they fall out as the heralds and kings return into St. James's Palace. First formal playing of the national anthem to God Save the King, and they prepare to march. They're saluting the colour of the parade ground here in Flowery Court, the colour which has been carried and lowered in salute was also adorned with 2 black mourning bands and also a wreath to mark that this is the anniversary of a battle honour for the King's Guard. Because they fire 62 guns, 21 for the City of London, 21 for the Tower, and an extra 20 because it's a royal fortress. And the Honourable Artillery, the oldest regiment in the British Army there, firing the remnant of those shots from the gun salute as the King's Guard return to their duties, protecting Buckingham Palace and St. James's Palace. And in Hyde Park too, the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery continue to George VI changed the name of the King's Troop. It had been from here at St James's Palace.
As the ceremonial here at St James's Palace comes to an end, we have just seen, I suppose, the full pomp and circumstance of the British state, and something we're going to see much more of during the course of this momentous week, momentous 10 days.
It's going to be very moving because the Queen having died, there is personal views about that all across the nation and around the world, but the ceremony which is being prepared for her state funeral, whenever that is ultimately announced to be, will demonstrate the very best of what can be done to reflect upon a great reign, well lived and well served. But we will see much more, as you say, in the coming months as we build up to the coronation of His Majesty the King at Westminster Abbey, a ceremony which is pretty much unchanged since the Archbishop St Dunstan crowned Edgar the Peaceable in the year 973, and the idea that it is the last coronation that's going to take place in the Western world is a sign of how traditions evolve and the foundation stone of what people are used to continue. And it doesn't prevent the political process, modernisation and everything else from taking place, but it vests the new king in the context of what we all are, which is people carrying on a national story and adding pages to it, and more pages were added today.
Indeed. I just want to bring in our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills, with me here, just outside St James's Palace, looking up at the balcony above Flowery Court where that proclamation was made. And Rhiannon, I mean, it was quite something, wasn't it? It almost transported you way back to medieval times, when that was the way you found out who the new one was.
We really had a front row seat to what I think was an example of ancient pageantry, but really observed through all of the lenses that had developed and evolved throughout Queen Elizabeth's reign. And we saw people, and people are still here now with their mobile phones, making sure that they were able to witness this moment. But also what was very striking for me was, for 7 decades we have become accustomed to that resounding sound of God Save the Queen, and today we witnessed a crowd singing God Save the King. I think I can step aside because I believe that Keir Starmer is here, and he was there in the Privy Council, so I will step to one side for you.
Very good to see you, and just tell us what you made of that experience. I mean, a unique experience for us all.
Unique, a real moment in history, and as one era ends, so another begins, and it's been mixed emotions, I think, across the whole country, because there's been outpouring of grief at the loss of Queen Elizabeth II. That constant has been in all of our lives. For 90% of the population, she's been the only queen, our queen, for all those years. And here, God Save the King.
It's proclamation, Easter, isn't it? That singing of the national anthem. The national anthem last night in simple words in your head.
Yes, and that is the ending of one era and the beginning of another. But it is a time when the whole nation can actually come together. You can feel that, as I say, outpouring of grief across the nation, all ages, all across the country, across the world. And then this sense of the next chapter, the next part of our history, and God Save the King.
What did you make taking in King Charles's statement address to the nation last night, and what we heard today about this strange mix that I suppose we, the public, impose upon our monarch? There he's grieving personally as a son along with his family, yet he's assuming this monumental role.
I thought it was a fantastic speech he made last night. It must be so difficult to grieve your mother and have this heavy public
element. I know from experience how hard it is to lose a mother, and that's the human emotion that he's going through. At the same time, this huge public responsibility. But I thought it was a fantastic speech, very humble speech last night, and I think everybody listening to that will feel heartened in what is quite an uncertain time.
And on that family element of it, it was good to see the new Prince of Wales,
yes,
William there, and the Queen Consort Camilla standing beside the throne as the King took his oath and made then his statements, more or less a statement of intent.
You could almost see the King taking strength from that, having comfort in their being there by his side. It was a real moment.
And were you one of the Privy Councillors who came outside to watch, or did you remain inside? Because
I was outside just over here.
I mean, it was quite something, wasn't it? You know, this mingling. You know, journalists, politicians, members of the public.
You've got Privy Councillors, you've got the royal family, you've got members of the public, and you know, a real moment in history. And you know, I think you just look at the faces, look at the number of people who are here to come and witness a part of this.
And of course the military, the Coldstream Guards, but they were a little bit busy, I suppose. And I think what has struck us watching the House of Commons yesterday, and I know there's another session today, is the suspension of hostilities.
Yes.
I mean, it is quite something, and to see you all mingling as you went in, chatting across party divides, because it's something that brings us all together.
It really does bring us all together, and often the behaviour in the House of Commons is not the best, but then on occasions like this we come together, and yesterday when the tributes were being made by various members of the House of Commons and the House of Lords, there was a real sense of the House coming together for this moment, and some fantastic tributes as well.
But just your thoughts on that, because you know, people are worried. We've had a week like no other in that we've had a change of our head of state and a change of our Prime Minister within 2 days.
Yes.
We really are in this moment of transition at a moment of deep, particularly economic danger.
Yes, the circumstances, we've got conflict in Ukraine, obviously that's a constant worry. We've got domestic issues, you know, the cost of living is worrying so many people as we go into the winter. You've got the NHS really struggling now, so you've got all those external factors, and then you have the uncertainty of this week where there's a new Prime Minister, and now we have a King proclaimed a moment ago, so there is uncertainty. And what Her Majesty II, I think, gave us above all else was that constant, that whatever the ups and downs, whatever was happening in the world, here was somebody with wisdom who'd seen most of it all before, and that everybody could look to as a sort of North Star. And that has meant, I think, this week has been about grief, but uncertainty about the future. And I think it's on all of us now to provide the leadership to move on from the Elizabethan era and take us next to the next chapter of our
history. And King Charles doing a very good job to give that sense of continuity right now.
Yes, he is. And I mean, he's, you know, been a public servant all his life and done so much already, but now he takes on that heavier responsibility.
And Sir Keir, do you know when you'll have your first meeting? Have you had your first meeting?
No, I'm going to have it this afternoon.
Oh, right.
At 3 o'clock, so okay. I'm very much looking forward to that.
So a busy day for you as well, and in the Commons as well.
I'm about to go to the Commons and get re-sworn in with a new oath to the King, and then later on this afternoon I will have an audience with His Majesty.
Sir Keir Starmer, thank you very much indeed for joining us on this historic day, quite something for us all to witness.
Thank you.
Leader of the opposition there, leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer. And as Sir Keir was telling us, it was that striking thing about this accession ceremony has been just a mixing down here of the general public, the politicians. You can see a former Archbishop of Canterbury just over my shoulder as well. And the fact that it's a harking back to, well, a historic ceremony that has been taking place for hundreds, well over 1,000 years in actual fact. And this is some of the more ramifications of that we are going to see. We're taking a picture there on the right-hand side of your screen of the City of London. That proclamation that we heard read out on the balcony of Flowery Court here at St James's Palace. It's just the first time it's read out. It's now disseminated throughout the realm, initially throughout the capital, in the City of London, also at what's deemed to be the centre of London, at the King Charles statue. That's entirely coincidental. In Charing Cross, it's just seen as the geographic centre of the capital, and then the proclamation will also be read out in the capitals of the nations and regions and in other locations as well. And Alistair Bruce can tell us more about what's about to happen.
Yes, we're going to see very much what we have already witnessed repeated at the Royal Exchange, which is at the heart of the City of London. And the city plays a very important part in the history of the nation, because kings might have had the power, but the City of London was where trading was done, and nobody has much power if they don't have the wealth of a nation to support it. And whatever the history of the City of London has been, particularly in more recent times, it still holds a place and a series of separate privileges. And one of them is that they should be informed of any major change to the crown. And in consequence, through history, the King's Herald, or in this case, the Clarence King of Arms, will come here to the Royal Exchange and will announce precisely what we've just heard. And all over the United Kingdom we'll see repeats of the proclamation that was read out by Garter King of Arms from St James's Palace. So there you are in the centre of the City of London. It is some time before it starts. It will be at exactly noon. And of course we saw Clarence King of Arms with others of the heralds on the balcony of Flowery Court, so they need to come here. And you'll see representatives of all the livery companies, all the commoners of the Parliament, as it were, of the city. It's divided into two houses: the House of Aldermen, who are like the Lords, and the House of Commoners, who are, as it were, the representatives of those who have voted for them into the city's own Parliament. It's a sort of reflection of the greater United Kingdom Parliament, but at city level. And the Lord Mayor of London, who is elected every year, is the head for a year of the city and takes precedence immediately after the King. So the Lord Mayor will be here, and all those around him, the aldermen and commoners, who will gather on those steps, and Clarence King of Arms will read out precisely what we've just heard, and we'll get another 3 cheers.
Alistair, thank you very much indeed. I want to talk now to some of the esteemed attendees at this accession council. So many recognisable faces, and this is one, of course, you will recognise, former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams joins me now. Very good to see you, Your Grace. Just give us your sense of what we've all just witnessed, and you were privileged enough, of course, to be inside the palace.
And it's not very often, but this cliche about knowing you're making history really makes sense. But there was that sense of a deep continuity being affirmed, something about where we've all come from together, and also the shape of the ceremony is one which tells you this is a country with a monarchy which depends on the consent of the people. It's not an absolutist monarchy, it's not a tyranny. It's a system where, as we saw, the council says, we recognise this has happened, we give our assent. And that's an important element of how we approach monarchy here, I'd say.
And tell me what you made of King Charles's speeches. Well, the oath, he has to take the oath. The personal declaration, though, it is what it says. It's very personal, paying tribute, of course, to the qualities that his mother instilled into him, but also a sign of his intent for the future.
I think so. We heard a very personal statement, as you say, a statement which recognises his debt to, if you like, watching how it's done, the sort of masterclass that we've had in the last 70 plus years from his mother. He knows how to do it. He's seen how it's done. And I think he has a real commitment to doing it like that, to being a focus of intelligent consensus in the country and bringing to bear a really, really good and unusual mind for the challenges of this position.
And of course, God comes into it. We got a real sense of his faith and the faith of his mother.
Yes, he's perfectly serious about his personal faith, as his mother was. And I think as she would have meant it, so he meant every word he said. These are jobs you can't easily do unless you've got some sense of calling and some sense of support that's more than just a kind of plebiscite or a kind of popular vote on a reality television show. You need a sense that there's something sustaining you. He's got that.
And what did you make of the gathering down here as it empties out here just outside Flowery Court? It really was all sections of society, people from all around the world, of course, members of the public who've been gathered down there on the Mall outside Buckingham Palace coming in, and then you lot, if I can call it that, then you did stand out, your Grace, there, but all of us just gazing up at the balcony.
Yes, there aren't many occasions where, as a country, we can do something like this together, a real public ritual. And it matters that we have these public rituals where we sense we're part of something larger, where our own agendas, our own preoccupations are part of an ongoing reality in the country. And that's, yes, the fact that there's such a variety of people is wonderfully assuring.
It's that understanding, though, of how it all connects up, the long reach of history, where, got here for to paraphrase Shakespeare, for a few fleeting moments, but this reaches back, way back into antiquity.
That's right, and to have a story that's more than just my story, to say, well, there's a community, a very diverse community, religiously, ethnically, all the rest of it, a diverse community working its way forward, trying to find a story that they can all hold in common. That's a hugely important positive thing.
It's interesting, that point you make there, Your Grace, about diversity, is that sense. I was thinking in my head as I looked particularly at the members of the public, I think they would have been very different 70 years ago when it last happened.
Yes, I think the members of the Privy Council are rather less different.
Yes, well, I do think that as well. It has to change.
It'll take time to catch up. But yes, looking around myself, I thought, in terms of age, in terms of race, background, wonderful to see such diversity and very promising for the future.
And then also the spontaneous cheering and applause. I mean, they couldn't let as many people who wanted to get in here. It's rather a narrow space, and there are safety concerns. But on Pall Mall up there, the Mall down there, we can hear all the way down to Buckingham Palace. There are thousands of people congregated, and if they weren't getting a piped feed to them, they were listening and watching on their phones, as is the way these days. And it was so spontaneous. 3 cheers, and then God Save the King breaks out.
Yes, I found a little prickle in the eyes when we started singing God Save the King. First time I've sung it in those terms, and tomorrow morning in our parish church we'll be singing that as well, and that'll, I think, be the emotional moment for a lot of people.
Rowan Williams, thank you very much indeed for your time. Very good to see you. Thank you. Former Archbishop of his thoughts on the meeting of the Accession Council, a council, of course, of which he was part, to announce and acknowledge the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, and the accession is in the name, the accession of King Charles III. We're turning our attention now to other parts of London. This is the City of London, where this process continues, where proclamations are going to be read out, first of all in the capital and then beyond. Alistair Bruce will talk us through this, the scene, as I say, in the City of London.
We're seeing the Court of Common Council, which is like the House of Commons of the City of London, being led in their blue robes. They are elected on a regular basis and serve the different wards which the City of London is divided into. And they obviously are like a parliament and raise taxes from all the people who live within the City of London and from the businesses that operate, and many of the livery companies that have their homes and bases here. And the Royal Exchange building, which was the centre of commerce, is behind the pillars that we see here. And because it's right at the heart of the City of London and it faces where the Lord Mayor lives, which is known as the Mansion House. It is deemed the best and most appropriate place for major occasions to occur. The War Memorial is there, and it reflects upon so many of the people who worked in the city and who left to serve during various different battles. Also, after the Court of Common Council, in the other robes will be the aldermen, the aldermanic representatives. Each of the wards is represented by aldermen and women, of course, and they wear the scarlet robes, and it is from that number that the Lord Mayor is selected each year, and former Lord Mayors continue for a few years after and hold their position of authority within the city. And it's a gathering really of a city life that reflects that it too is loyal to His Majesty the King. The Royal Standard at Buckingham Palace, which is completely unchanged from the one that we recall from the time of Queen Elizabeth II, in the top right-hand corner. If it was flying in the opposite direction, you have the English lions, and they're repeated in one of the lower quarters, and also at the top you have the Lion Rampant of Scotland and the Golden Harp of Northern Ireland, and it flies underneath the crown on top of Buckingham Palace. Meanwhile in the city, the band of the Household Division bringing in what you have here is the Honourable Artillery Company's band. They look just like the Brigade of Guards, except instead of gold they have silver, because they are reservists, and they'll bring in the pikemen and musketeers, also formed from the Honourable Artillery Company, and one of the ancient bodyguards of the City of London.
Well, we're going to stay on those scenes, those ceremonial scenes in the City of London. But I want to talk now to James Matthews, Balmoral, our Scotland correspondent, of course. And James, the fact that, yes, it's starting now, the proclamation, the new King's proclamation in London, but of course it's going to take place, it's going to be read out, it's going to be heard throughout the United Kingdom.
That's correct, Dermot. Yes, and while the ceremony takes place surrounding the new monarch, tributes continue to be paid for the one past. That's certainly the case here at Balmoral. The Queen's body is still here. We should hear more details perhaps later today about the process towards the funeral, a journey initially to Edinburgh and then onwards down south. But right now, at the gates of Balmoral, there have been several hundred people over the course of this morning laying tributes, floral tributes, and among them are Marina, Betsy and Pippa. Hello, you've come here, we're looking at a quiet, respectful, yet certainly sorrowful crowd. Marina, tell me why you've come here.
We just wanted to show our respect to the Queen as fellow Aberdeenshire people and farmers. We know the Queen was a country girl at heart, and so we just wanted to show our appreciation of the dedication she has shown the country throughout her lifetime.
A sad time.
A sad, reflective time, but also celebrate the wonderful life that the Queen has had, and we look forward to her son, King Charles, taking on the role of monarch.
Betsy, you came here, you laid some flowers. Why was that important to you?
It was important to me because, so far in my life I've only known the Queen Majesty, but there are going to be more monarchs in my life, but she was a wonderful Queen. She always dedicated her life and all her love to her country, and I found that really inspirational, so I'll always remember her.
Yeah. Pippa, what about you? What did you think of the Queen?
The Queen was a very kind person. She was always dedicated to her work, and I always admired her outfits.
Yeah, her outfits. Well, let me ask you about your outfits, actually. Marina, the girls have come in school uniform. Why?
Well, the girls just felt that the Queen, she would enjoy seeing them in their St Margaret's uniform, and it was quite respectful for her, so it was nice.
Much going on down south. A new monarch, King Charles. What's your view of his succession?
I think he'll be a wonderful king. He seems very happy within himself. He loves the farming community, which will help us. And he knows what to do. He knows the ropes.
What do you think, girls? King Charles III, what do you think?
Well, I think he'll be a wonderful king because, he is the son of a wonderful Queen, Queen Elizabeth II, and I think, he'll follow quite well in her footsteps, keep on the legacy of wonderful kings and queens to come, because, she was just wonderful, as I said, dedicated, loved her country, loved the outdoors, the countryside, and I think King Charles III will just follow in her footsteps really well.
Thank you, Betsy. Thank you, Pippa. Thank you very much indeed, Marina. Today, the former employees of the Balmoral estate are being invited to go and to pay their private respects, Dermot. I can tell you, somebody who's been in and around Balmoral over recent days was telling me about the impact that we actually don't see publicly on those who were close to the Queen, who worked for the Queen and worked with the Queen. And that's clearly something they're being allowed to work through on the estate, having been invited back today. There are still members of the royal family here. Princess Royal, Tim Lawrence, Zara Tindall, Beatrice and Eugenie. Prince Andrew's here as well, and perhaps we will see them today. Many flowers laid at the gates of Balmoral. There is the opportunity, at least, for them to come out of the gates, perhaps engage with the public, interact, to view those floral tributes. No confirmation of that yet, but the opportunity certainly is there.
James Matthews at Balmoral, thank you very much indeed. We're going back now live to the City of London, the heart of old London, what once was London itself. Our royal commentator, Alistair Bruce, will describe to us the scenes that we're witnessing, and this, the second proclamation, as we can see at the bottom of our screens, and this will be the second proclamation of Charles III, and an hour's gap from the original one here at St James's Palace.
Dermot, there used to be 3, but they've cut it down to just these 2 now, and the second will take place here in the City of London by ancient tradition. The state trumpeters who've been led from Guildhall Yard, along with the other military components, and they will take their position. And you'll see that on the banners of their trumpets are the black mourning ribbons to remind us that this is a sad and muffled occasion as the drum itself plays them into position. And we'll shortly see at 20 past the arrival of Clarenceau, King of Arms, who will read out the proclamation accompanied by other heralds who will be in the party. And it's a reminder that while we are so used to instantaneously knowing every piece of information, information was passed around before the days of technology in a very much more sedentary way, and it would have taken up to an hour for the heralds to arrive here. They used to come by carriage, but they're coming by vehicles now. And we are at the heart of this marketplace, and there in the background of the picture you can see the Bank of England. You can see obviously the War Memorial, and everyone now gathered in this public area that is naturally formed by the Bank of England, the Royal Exchange, the building on which steps the aldermen can be seen, and the scene is set with the great equestrian statue of the Duke of Wellington, who after all had brought victory and freedom from the danger that was seen in Napoleon way back at the time when the city was very nervous that if Napoleon won, the wealth of Britain would be lost. And so with the pikemen and musketeers with their colour present, the scene is effectively set, and you can see the area in the middle of the steps there where Clarenceau, King of Arms, will read out the proclamation, and we will see very much a similar event carried out as took place at St James's. And for the King, this is the progression of news. He gave instruction, if you remember, by saying approved, that these proclamations should take place across his kingdom. And some nations still reflect the fact that it takes time, and so some of these proclamations will indeed take place tomorrow in those different, more distant parts of the United Kingdom from London. The city owes its loyalty, obviously, to the King, and the traditions of some difficulty, often particularly in the Middle Ages, between monarchs and the city, are well documented. But the city's wealth always gave it these special privileges, and they are being reflected today. But it was ironic that at a time of national challenge, when the Prime Minister was announcing to Parliament some fairly significant measures to be taken, that the Bank of England, of course, would have had its interests in, all that was paused temporarily by the shock announcement that the Queen was dead. But today, as I was saying earlier, the nation raises its head for this moment of constitutional observation that we have a new king. It's a waiting game now for the arrival from St James's Palace of the heralds. They will be received underneath the entrance and balcony of the Mansion House, and the parade marshal will then organise the procession to bring the heralds and Clarenceau, King of Arms, to the place of proclamation very shortly. The proclamations will also take place at different parts of the United Kingdom, at the Market Cross in Edinburgh, and in different places where it is necessary also to make sure that everybody in the country knows what is to take place. The state trumpeters, who wear their state livery that was funded by the City of London after the restoration of the Crown in 1660, and the cost being quite considerable. The depleted royal treasure chest couldn't afford it, and so the City of London stepped up. And that's why for any events that take place in the city, the state trumpeters and indeed the mounted band of the Household Cavalry Regiment are entitled to wear the state coats. And we look at what is placed on their chests, which is the royal cipher of E2R, and that will shortly be changed. The College of Arms is near this building at the heart of the city, and that is where much is being done now to configure the new royal coat of arms, which will adjust slightly. Also in Scotland, the Court of the Lord Lion will be making the relevant changes and representing them to the King. Not so much in the format of the coat of arms, but in perhaps the style, if that's what the King wants. And there we see the E2R, remembering the late Queen. It's about 15 minutes now until the proclamation will be given. And a chance to consider that not long ago, from the Tower of London, which is nearby, former Lord Mayors there who are conversing. There's always a representation of the former Lord Mayors who wear the robes as aldermen, and they are given great positions of respect here in the city after having served. Of course, during COVID, the Lord Mayor of London served for 2 years because so little could be delivered within the city during the first year of COVID, and so he continued. And the Lord Mayor of London is the chief civilian and, as it were, almost the top of the whole civic structure, which, as I was explaining, is divided not just into the aldermen and commoners who are lined up on the steps, but also all over the city, the many different livery companies representing trades that haven't occurred for quite a long time, awaiting the arrival of the Clarenceau King of Arms, Mr. Tim Duke. The heralds are experts in heraldry and genealogy, which is the study of family history and pedigrees, and they maintain records of the coats of arms that have been granted in England and Wales, and in Scotland they have a separate authority at the Court of the Lord Lion. And very much today we've recognised that Scotland is a very different nation to the formats of England, and the union between the two was brought about in 1707, and that will be reflected later on.
Alistair, thank you. While we stay on those scenes in the City of London awaiting the reading of the second proclamation of Charles III, as you can see, that will happen at midday. I'm joined now by Baroness Scotland, the Secretary-General, of course, of the Commonwealth of Nations, member of the Accession Council, Privy Council, who was in there in St James's Palace. And Baroness, very good to see you. Just let me get your sense of what you've just witnessed. It was very moving, yet, of course, constitutionally important as well.
No, absolutely. I mean, it was literally one of the most historic moments that most of us will see in our lifetime. Of course, we had 70 years of Her Majesty the Queen, and this ceremony will not have happened, of course, for that time. So it was poignant because people were recognising how much Her Majesty the Queen had given us, but also welcoming the new king, and for the new King Charles to make those constitutional declarations in such a sober and profound way. I think it was moving for everyone, and it is a moment I'm sure no one in that room will ever forget.
And we think first and foremost, I suppose, about the King's declarations towards the United Kingdom, but of course, as Secretary-General of the Commonwealth. Of course, so many attendees from the Commonwealth nations there as well. Very important what he was saying to the entire Commonwealth.
Absolutely. I mean, he has taken over the role of being head of the Commonwealth. That's 56 countries, 2.5 billion people, 60% of whom are under the age of 30. So it's a momentous moment for all of us. And what was so wonderful was, of course, in 2018, when the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting took place here in London, and I remember us coming through these very portals, all of the heads unanimously came to the decision that if this sad day ever occurred, then the then Prince Charles, now King Charles III, would become automatically, with their unanimous agreement, the head of the Commonwealth. And it's something that he has said that the Commonwealth has been one of the foundations of his life. And I think we've seen that. The Commonwealth have appreciated him, and they are really welcoming the new king as they say goodbye to the old queen.
Well, we've had a change of monarch, and you are.
King's gone. Slow arms.
The state trumpeters announcing to the people of London that the heralds are here and they have a proclamation to make. And that proclamation will be made by Clarence O, King of Arms, who will come from the Mansion House where that first fanfare was made, and the procession will be formed to bring Clarence O, King of Arms to the steps of the Royal Exchange, led by the Parade Marshal, Marshal of the City. The heralds still wearing the tabards that show the King's coat of arms. And let's recall the concept of what it must have meant to a city going about its business and suddenly hearing the trumpeters of the monarch announcing that the messengers of royal authority, the kings of arms, the heralds of arms and the pursuivants of arms have arrived with a proclamation of some note. Was it about the king? Was it about war? What is it about? For this was the way that communication from the monarch used to be made. And following the heralds and the kings, the sheriffs of the City of London, the chaplain of the Lord Mayor, the sword bearer and mace bearer of the City of London, and the Lord Mayor of London is escorting Clarenceux King of Arms, Mr. Tim Duke, who will read the proclamation, followed by the City Remembrancer, responsible for all ceremonial events that take place in the city. And they will line up in front of the Royal Exchange, and at precisely 12 o'clock the proclamation will be given. The tabard was evolved from the coat of arms that used to be worn over armour by kings. And indeed, old tabards that were worn by kings were precisely the garments that were passed to the king's heralds in order that they could move around the battlefield and communicate as necessary in the king's name. At a minute to 12, the state trumpeters will sound a fanfare, and the common cry and the sergeant of arms will demand silence. And at 12 o'clock, Clarenceux King of Arms will read the proclamation and will proclaim at the end, "God save the King." Once again, we'll have a verse of the national anthem, and the Lord Mayor will then call for 3 cheers. Immediately afterwards, the procession will reform. Clarenceux King of Arms in position with the proclamation. It's quite an unwieldy piece of paper, particularly in high wind, but fortunately that is not the challenge at the moment. And to the right of the picture we see the cocked hat of the City Marshal, who will give instruction on precisely when events are to take place. And the intention is to hit exactly noon, which was following the instructions given by the King by order in council at the accession council we earlier witnessed. Of course, the delays may seem long now, but when in the old days the trumpet having been sounded, there would have been a great run of people, hurry to the exchange. There's going to be an announcement, and today we have order and pageantry which has evolved over the years, and it is a tribute to the late Queen, who so regularly attended events here in the City of London. We can recall the famous walkabout she did at her Silver Jubilee and her Golden Jubilee, when she came to St Paul's Cathedral in her golden coronation carriage to give thanks to Almighty God in St Paul's Cathedral for a reign of first 25 years and then 50. And she returned again on the 60th anniversary, but alone, and walked alone down the great aisle of St Paul's, the City of London's cathedral. And then for her 70th anniversary, the Platinum Jubilee, there was a sadness that she could not attend due to mobility issues. And of course it was a part of what we now know was preparing her for the gathering of the angels earlier this week. The City of London awaits news, the confirmation that there is a new king. The state trumpeters at the Royal Exchange will now sound a fanfare. And the trumpeters of the Mansion House will reply, and the Common Crier and the Sergeant-at-Arms will demand silence.
Whereas it has pleased Almighty God to call to his mercy our late Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth II, of blessed and glorious memory, by whose decease the crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is solely and rightfully come to the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George. We therefore, the Lord Spiritual and Temporal of this realm, and members of the House of Commons, together with other members of Her late Majesty's Privy Council, and representatives of the realms and territories, aldermen and citizens of London, and others, do now hereby, with one voice and consent of tongue and heart, publish and proclaim that the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George is now, by the death of our late sovereign of happy memory, become our only lawful and rightful liege lord, Charles III, by the grace of God of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of his other realms and territories, King, Head of the Commonwealth, Defender of the Faith, to whom we do acknowledge all faith and obedience with humble affection, beseeching God, by whom kings and queens do reign, to bless his majesty with long and happy years to reign over us. Given at St. James's Palace this 10th day of September in the year of our Lord 2022. God save the King. God save the King.
Three cheers for His Majesty the King. Hip hip, hooray! Hip hip, hooray! Hip hip, hooray!
The proclamation done in the City of London. And the crowd that had gathered, which again in its own way reflects the history of why this ceremony takes place, expressing their joy and delight at the accession of King Charles III. The City Marshal, Parade Marshal here, now leads the procession away from the Royal Exchange and back to the Mansion House, the home and official residence of the Lord Mayor. And for the Kings of Arms, heralds and pursuivants, both in ordinary and extraordinary, for the new King, it's the conclusion of their duties at this point. And for us all to see now further proclamations, and they can be done, and sometimes will be, at small towns and villages, in accordance with custom or choice, but it is the way in which the formal acknowledgement of a new reign is communicated across the United Kingdom. And we will witness similar events with similar local customs, perhaps none quite so flamboyantly decorous as the City of London, with the pikemen and musketeers who echo periods of English history that go back to the challenges of defending this City of London as a heart and source of commerce and markets over the centuries. We have a new king, and the City of London will return to its business on Monday, of course with the muted reality of a nation in grief for the late Queen, but business and the markets never sleep.
And Alistair, can I just ask you on that issue of the, as you pointed out there, the flamboyance we can still see there of the ceremony in the City of London, just a mile or two away from St James's Palace. How come it outshines the original, the most important business, which was done an hour ago, an hour before? It's here at a royal palace, at St James's Palace.
Well, the City of London has a dichotomy of two strands, really. It is a compellingly modern and forward-looking marketplace where every day, particularly young and urgent traders do their business. But at the same time, it holds to its traditions and does so with great determination. And the history of the liveries, which is at the heart of how the city in its own way has evolved, are very much a part of that. And there are different trades that go on around the world that echo from directly what used to occur here. The plying of ships up and down the Thames according to the tidal path, and the arrival of spices and the delivery of leathers and the delivery of this and that was all part of what made the money for the city and thereby for the treasury of the king. And because the City of London has chosen to maintain its traditions, it's very much its choice. There were similar traditions like this in many other cities of the United Kingdom, but through the political vicissitudes of time, those councils have chosen to set aside much of the traditions that were enjoyed. But the City of London shows no shame in enjoying its past and mirroring it against the reflection of a fast-moving, urgent and busy commercial city.
Alistair, thank you so much. Alistair Bruce, our royal commentator there. And Alistair, I thank you not just on behalf of all of your colleagues who work with you, but of course all viewers and listeners to Sky News' output. I think anyone listening to you over the last couple of hours or so can't have failed to have gleaned at least 20 new fascinating facts. Thank you once again. And as we still take in those scenes from the City of London, the procession in the City of London, I'm here at St James's Palace with our royal correspondent Rhiannon Mills. And as I was saying to Alistair, Rhiannon, of course it was here where the proclamation was originally read out, and that took place after what we saw for the first time taking place inside St James's Palace, the Accession Council, and then that signing of the oath by the new king. He's formally proclaimed king, and then he signs this solemn oath, and it was such a moving moment, particularly, I guess, because he was surrounded by the most immediate members of his family.
And I think within these very formal proceedings, we watched the most ancient pageantry, didn't we, unfold on the balcony here. But we're again reminded that at the centre of all of this, you have a family who are in mourning. And King Charles, in his message that he again delivered as he signed his oath, reflected on how much it means to the family to know that there is such overwhelming support for them at this moment, and praised his mother's example of lifelong service. But he will now be incredibly conscious that he now needs the support of his family who are around him. And as you mentioned there, you had the new Prince of Wales, Prince William, there as a Privy Councillor, and also Camilla, his Queen Consort, standing so close to him as he was reading out, again, a very heartfelt message, his pledge to continue the service that his mother gave us over 7 decades. But also an interesting point that we've been told is that the ink pot that was on the desk, which was used to then sign that oath, was actually a gift from Prince William and Prince Harry. So you're getting those little touches, aren't you, where they are showing us that as a family they're finding it difficult to come to terms with this, but they are pulling together. But for him, of course, the hard work continues. The oath is over, the proclamation is done, but this afternoon the constitutional duties, he picks those up once again. So as you were hearing from Keir Starmer earlier, he is one of a few who is going to enjoy an audience with the King this afternoon. So we know that the King will receive the Archbishop of Canterbury at Buckingham Palace. He will then receive the Prime Minister again, but also with members of the Cabinet. After that, he will receive leaders of the opposition, so the likes of Keir Starmer, who you spoke to earlier. And then he's also going to speak to the Dean of Westminster as well. That, we understand, is going to be a private meeting, and you would understand why, because of the likely involvement of the Dean of Westminster when it comes to that state funeral that we will look towards in the coming days.
Tough to ask, Rhiannon, but has to be addressed. Did we learn anything about the state funeral itself?
So we hadn't expected this, but it was confirmed that the King has signed an order in which he has authorised that we will have a national bank holiday on the day of the funeral. However, it has not been announced yet when that funeral is going to be held. You have to remember that the planning for this event has been decades in the making. But ultimately, one of the key responsibilities of the new king, as it would be for any grieving family, is to look again at the funeral plans, decide whether or not they believe that they are still fitting with what Her late Majesty would have wanted, whether they are fitting with what the family want to portray, and whether they are a fitting way to allow the country and the rest of the world to pay their respects. But later on today, we are anticipating we will potentially get a date for that funeral. And also, of course, we have to remember this has all happened so quickly. It was only on Tuesday that we saw the Queen carrying out that last official duty in public as she oversaw the handover of the Prime Ministers. She is still in Scotland. Her coffin is still in Scotland. And so we wait to see what is going to be the process over the coming days in terms of her returning to London. But as I said, expecting potentially more details on that later.
Rhiannon, thank you very much indeed. Rhiannon Mills there, our royal correspondent. And from a ceremony here at St James's Palace, centuries in the making, the accession council, the taking of the oath by the new king, the proclamation of the new king, King Charles III, and a personal declaration from the king paying tribute once again, as he did last night, to the qualities and the values that his mother instilled into him, that he has pledged to carry forward as he takes over as King Charles III. The proclamations now spreading throughout the country, initially just a mile or so away, as you can see there, in the City of London, where the ceremonial is still taking place. And to talk us through that and what's to come, let's go back to Buckingham Palace. The crowds gathering there, they've all dispersed from here. What a spectacle they did see here at St James's Palace, and still gathering, I know, around Buckingham Palace. My colleague Sarah Jane Mee is there.
The new good afternoon to you from Buckingham Palace. The new king, King Charles III, has been proclaimed for the second time, this time in the City of London. Earlier in the day, he was formally recognised at a special ceremony attended by senior politicians and royals. The king has also approved an order declaring the day of Queen Elizabeth's funeral a bank holiday, though the date is yet to be announced. King Charles III was formally announced monarch at the Accession Council, attended by around 200 Privy Councillors. Also present, the Prime Minister, Liz Truss, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, the new Prince of Wales, and Camilla, the Queen Consort. It was chaired by the newly appointed Lord President of the Council and Leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt.
My Lords, it is my sad duty to inform you that Her Most Gracious Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, has passed away on Thursday, the 8th of September, 2022, at Balmoral Castle.
We, therefore, the Lords spiritual and temporal of this realm, and members of the House of Commons, together with other members of Her late Majesty's Privy Council, and representatives of the realms and territories, aldermen and citizens of London and others, do now hereby, with one voice and consent of tongue and heart, publish and proclaim that the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George is now, by the death of our late sovereign of happy memory, become our only lawful and rightful liege lord, Charles III, by the grace of God of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of his other realms and territories, King, Head of the Commonwealth, Defender of the Faith, to whom we do acknowledge all faith and obedience with humble affection, beseeching God, by whom kings and queens do reign, to bless his majesty with long and happy years to reign over us. God save the King!
God save the King!
Well, after the accession proclamation text was read aloud, the Prince of Wales then signed the official document, followed by other senior members of the council, also called the Platform Party, including the Queen Consort, and also the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss.
The First Lord of the Treasury and Prime Minister of the United.
The senior members of the Platform Party then filed out of that room to wait for the new king. As the country's previous 6 prime ministers stood solemn side by side with their arms folded in front of them. Then Charles III joined the ceremony in the throne room and took his seat before reading aloud the Declaration and the Oath of Scotland.
My lords, ladies and gentlemen, it is my most sorrowful duty to announce to you the death of my beloved mother, the Queen. I know how deeply you, the entire nation, and I think I may say the whole world, sympathise with me in the irreparable loss we've all suffered. It is the greatest consolation to me to know of the sympathy expressed by so many to my sister and brothers, and that such overwhelming affection and support should be extended to our whole family in our loss. To all of us as a family, as to this kingdom and the wider family of nations of which it is a part, my mother gave an example of lifelong love and of selfless service. My mother's reign was unequalled in its duration, its dedication and its devotion. Even as we grieve, we give thanks for this most faithful life. I am deeply aware of this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities of sovereignty which have now passed to me. In taking up these responsibilities, I shall strive to follow the inspiring example I have been set in upholding constitutional government and to seek the peace, harmony and prosperity of the peoples of these islands and of the Commonwealth realms and territories throughout the world. In this purpose, I know that I shall be upheld by the affection and loyalty of the peoples whose sovereign I have been called upon to be, and that in the discharge of these duties, I will be guided by the counsel of their elected parliaments. In all this, I am profoundly encouraged by the constant support of my beloved wife. I take this opportunity to confirm my willingness and intention to continue the tradition of surrendering the hereditary revenues, including the Crown Estate, to my government for the benefit of all, in return for the sovereign grant, which supports my official duties as head of state and head of nation. And in carrying out the heavy task that has been laid upon me, and to which I now dedicate what remains to me of my life, I pray for the guidance and help of Almighty God.
The new king, who is now head of the Church of England, then signed 2 parchment copies of an oath guaranteeing security for the Church of Scotland. They were then signed by witnesses that included the Prince of Wales, the Queen Consort and the Secretary of State for Scotland. The new king then withdrew from the throne room. Minutes later, the bugle sounded. Then the Garter King of Arms read the official proclamation of Charles as king.
Whereas it has pleased Almighty God to call to his mercy our late Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth II, of blessed and glorious memory, by whose decease the crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is solely and rightfully come to the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George. We, therefore, the Lords Spiritual and Temporal of this realm, and members of the House of Commons, together with other members of Her late Majesty's Privy Council, and representatives of the realms and territories, aldermen and citizens of London and others, do now hereby, with one voice and consent of tongue and heart, publish and proclaim that the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George is now, by the death of our late sovereign of happy memory, become our only lawful and rightful liege lord, Charles III. By the grace of God, of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of his other realms and territories, King, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith, to whom we do acknowledge all faith and obedience with humble affection, beseeching God, by whom kings and queens do reign, to bless his majesty with long and happy years to reign over us. Given at St. James's Palace this 10th day of September in the year of our Lord, 2022.
The captain of the King's Guard will now order the troops to present arms, and the colour will be lowered. And then God Save the King.
As the bugles sounded, gun salutes rang out around London, across the country and in Gibraltar. And then the national anthem played to honour the new king.
Three cheers for His Majesty the King. Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray!
In charge, with replace, Victor. Replace. Attention.
Well, after the official proclamations, the one at St James's Palace and also the one in the City of London, King Charles III and his Queen Consort Camilla headed back here to Buckingham Palace. Thousands of people have been assembling here since yesterday. A patient stream of people coming with family, friends and flowers to the gates of Buckingham Palace. And this was a moment they hoped they would see after their patient wait. The new king returning to Buckingham Palace. The king has a busy day ahead of him. We understand he is back at Buckingham Palace now for a number of meetings this afternoon, a number of audiences. They're taking place in the 1844 room, which is described as one of the most important rooms in Buckingham Palace. You may recognise it from watching your TV screens. It's the room where the Queen has made a number of her Christmas speeches, and also where she received foreign dignitaries. But the new king and the Queen Consort arriving back. We understand that this afternoon at around 2 o'clock, the king will be receiving the Archbishop of Canterbury here at the palace. After that, he'll also be receiving the Prime Minister, Liz Truss, and members of the Cabinet. He will also have time to meet the opposition parties. And finally, later today, King Charles III will receive the Dean of Westminster here at Buckingham Palace. Oh, well, let's return now to our royal commentator, Alistair Bruce, who has been with us all day. Alistair, it has been an extremely busy day. What more can we expect? We've been talking there about what will be going on behind closed doors there in Buckingham Palace this afternoon. We will get official pictures, but a very busy time for the new king.
Very much so. And you talking about the Dean of Westminster going to see the king. Of course, the preparations now for the state funeral and also for the coming coronation, which will, to a huge extent, in different ways, weigh upon both the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Dean of Westminster. But for the king, there is just so much to take on. And it may seem as though there are but the boxes and the other things. But, you know, there's just so much that he will now have to be briefed on and understand. The sensitivities of the state of the United Kingdom in terms of where it sits in the world will need to be brought to his attention by the Prime Minister, and of course he will have the chance to formalise the cabinet appointments that the late Queen approved. Well, all of this is function and process, which is what the King must do. The King is the conscience now of the United Kingdom, and whilst the battle of the political process must continue in Parliament and with government in the King's name, it is the conscience of the nation that the King must now encompass and take on, just as his mother did. So it's going to be a very busy day for him.
So much formality and so much ceremony so far, Alistair. When will the King have time to be with his family?
We're going to find out soon more about the plans for what is termed the obsequies, the process of the funeral of the late Queen. We know that Her Majesty is at rest up at Balmoral. We've been told by James Matthews that members of the estate there at Balmoral are going to have a chance to go and pay their respects to the Queen in the castle. And we know that members of his family are there, but I think the King's principal concern, and this is the burden of sovereignty, is to the nation and to taking on the headship of the state. And there will be announcements later on of the return of the Queen's body to London and ultimately the interment at Windsor Castle, along with Prince Philip. So I think that, you know, the process is immense that is being dealt with. The delays are because the Earl Marshal, the armed forces and many other organisations, particularly the government, are involved in trying to make sure that all of this process takes place. But with the Accession Council today formally starting the process with the presence of the Queen and also of the Prince of Wales, it's very special that we now have the confirmation done. And for this 24 hours with the flags at the top of their masts, this is supposed within the period of the nation holding its head low, a time for celebration of the new King.
Alistair Bruce, thank you. We will speak again later on. Alistair Bruce with us throughout the day.